Um, Please welcome my friend and colleague, Morgan. Uh, Pronounce your last name, Landeraaen.
Landeraaen, yep.
Landeraaen. And she's here to talk to us about social emotional stuff. And I know that that's always a big topic. And so I'll let Morgan just go ahead and get started.
Okay, perfect. So just a little bit about me. I want to take a second and say thank you for joining us. I'm excited to have the opportunity to visit with you about social emotional health. So I have my bachelor's in psychology, my master's in social work, and then I am a licensed clinical social worker. And I just recently completed my basic training in EMDR therapy. And I have worked in schools or with schools for a little over 10 years now. So I know a little bit about what it's like to be in the building, in the trenches, with the kids, and hopefully I can share some insight and some practical resources for you. Outside of work, I am a mom to 2 little kids. I love to eat ice cream any chance I get, and I like spending time in my kitchen. So that's just a little bit about me, and I'm excited to spend some time with you guys. So what we're going to learn today, you want to go to the next slide, Jackie?
Yes.
All right, so we're going to just do a brief overview of the crisis cycle and a little bit of brain development. I love the brain. I could talk about it all day long, but I tried to really condense it and think about what would be the most impactful for you guys to understand and walk away with today. And then some tips for managing some challenging behaviors. We're going to talk a little bit about social emotional learning framework, and hopefully just give you a better understanding of what that big umbrella is. We'll chat a little bit about age-appropriate behaviors versus concerning behaviors. And I focused more on younger age students. If you are interested in learning a little bit more about like junior high or high school age students, I'd be happy to visit kind of with you individually on those. And then some positive connection strategies. So those will kind of be our topics for today that hopefully we will get covered. So as we begin, I want us to just kind of all keep in mind our trauma lens. While this is not specifically a trauma training, it's always kind of in the background of what we do when we work with any human, but also especially our little people who usually have more going on in their life than we know. But I also want to be respectful of our audience here. Sometimes we come into this field because of our own life experiences and things that we have encountered. And so I just want us to all kind of keep that trauma lens on today as we work through this material, being sensitive to the impact trauma may have on yourself and others, understanding and utilizing tools to support yourself and others in regulating during times of stress, and identifying and supporting system changes to reduce re-traumatization. So really kind of big global ideas, but just keeping that in the back of our minds as we work through today. As I talk to any helping profession, but especially teachers, I like to just kind of take a minute to honor the work that you guys do. I know that it is really demanding. It is really sacrificial work, but it's really profound. A lot of times teachers are, right, they're the front lines of the schools and really our society. But I like to take a minute to just make sure that we're taking care of ourselves. Kind of like the flight attendant on the airplane, we can't take care of others if we don't take care of ourselves. So just a caution I like to put out, keeping in mind burnout. If you're starting to notice that yourself is feeling really tired, maybe dealing with some minor depression or anxiety, feeling kind of numbed out in work, maybe just kind of take a minute to check in with yourself or a trusted friend or family and kind of work through that. Compassion fatigue is something that we often see in people who are more naturally empathetic, because they can feel other people's feelings a little more deeply. But that comes from really repeat exposure to traumatic situations. So a teacher, you've been working for 5, 6, 7, 8 years, and every year you have the kid that you're making CPS calls on and is coming to school with bruises. You are being repeatedly exposed to someone else's trauma, the definition of compassion fatigue. Over time, that can diminish your ability to feel empathy towards someone else's situation, which we never want to do, because then we aren't honoring their experience, and we aren't performing our best self. So I really want to just kind of put that out there. If you're noticing some things like that within yourself, or you have concerns, there are resources out to help. And then vicarious trauma is a profound shift in the worldview. So if you've noticed like just a complete lack of joy in the classroom, the schools, what's the point anymore? Maybe just kind of check in with yourself and someone that you trust, because we want to make sure that we're all putting our best foot forward and we're healthy so we can help our students that we so deeply care about. So kind of moving into the meat of today is the crisis cycle. And so how many of you guys, go ahead and just like raise your hand in the chat if you've seen the crisis cycle or if you've learned about it before. A little bit. Okay. So we're not going to get too deep into it today, but I just want to do kind of an overview because I think it's a really nice frame in understanding maybe what's going on physiologically with kids when they start to get escalated. So you can kind of see the more intense the behavior is and the longer something is going, right? Those two things are kind of our axis points. So our baseline levels are kind of just where we are naturally. Everybody has a different baseline just based on our temperament, kind of our mood, how well the baby slept last night, what did you eat for breakfast, how many cups of coffee you had, all of those things. But we also want to honor that every kid's baseline is going to be a little bit different because of that. So a minor off day doesn't mean that somebody's escalated. So it's really those first couple weeks of school, getting to know personalities, getting to know kind of temperaments and just what's natural for somebody so you can notice when things start to feel off. Then there's usually a trigger. Usually the trigger is something minor. The tag on their shirt is itching, or they didn't get the chocolate chip muffin they wanted. They, don't like how Susie's breathing next to them, whatever it might be. But it starts to just kind of irritate them and rub them the wrong way. And then usually things start to continue to bother them or escalate them. And we call that, right, the trigger, because it's starting to activate the stress response within the body and starting to send stress hormones to the brain. So there's all those things happening inside that we can't see. And sometimes, like when I visit with teachers, like it just came out of nowhere. Usually doesn't come out of nowhere, but it doesn't make sense to us why they started to escalate so quickly. But the trigger was maybe a couple hours ago and we didn't know it because they came from a different room or it wasn't a big deal to us at that time. Then it usually moves into the escalation phase where you get the bigger, more noticeable kind of responses, right? Maybe the kid starts crying. Maybe they are yelling at this point. They have refused to work. They've pushed their paper away. Some kind of bigger behaviors. So we have some attention now. At this point, what's happening internally for them, their brain is going off and their stress hormones are starting to release that they are not safe. And so their brain has kind of left the present moment and is focused on their immediate safety. Now, this is something that gets kind of hard because we think they're safe in the classroom, but their brain is telling them and processing the information it's receiving that they do not feel safe. So it's really important for us to kind of, when we notice these things, put ourselves into their perspective. And in these moments, their perspective is reality. It's not like I'm the adult, this is what I think, you're right, you're wrong. It's really, we want to take their perspective and honor it in these moments. Then we get into that crisis point. That's going to look different for every kid and every behavior. A lot of times we can easily identify the really big ones, right? Kid throws a chair across the room, cussing at you, things like that. This might also look like the kid who shuts down in the back of the classroom and doesn't talk, won't make eye contact with you, won't move for a little while. This might look like the kid who goes and sits in the corner at recess and doesn't play with anybody, won't eat their snack. It's going to look different for every kid, and that's why getting to know them and what their baseline is so important. So at this moment in crisis, their stress hormones are being released. So we've got adrenaline, we've got cortisol, we've got serotonin, we've got dopamine, we've got all these things firing in these little bodies. So their bodies can't really process like math or reading or what's going on at that time, right? We need to help calm their system before we do anything else. So safety is our utmost concern at this moment for them and for everybody else around them. Then moving into de-escalation, usually you can notice a student starting to de-escalate, their breathing will change, it will start to slow, because when we get really stressed, we can't take deep breaths. If you think about a time when you've been really stressed, you're sitting in a doctor's office or you're in the car, you start to take more shallow breaths. It's a stress response to get us more oxygen. And so, and like, think about like when you're running, right? You would take those more shallow breaths. So we want to help calm their breathing. You can usually notice that change. You can also usually notice a kid will start to look around and make eye contact, not necessarily with you as the person, but they'll start to like notice the chair is tipped over, or they'll start to notice like, why is my book on the ground? Or where'd my cookie go? They'll kind of start to like connect things and make eye contact with objects in the room is usually another sign they're starting to de-escalate. Once a student starts to talk about anything, but they ask a question or they say, get away from me again, but they're talking, that's usually a sign that we've kind of worked through that de-escalation and heading into stabilization. At that point, you want to just kind of get them to a safe place where talking's able to happen. So out of the main classroom, people not around. And then we kind of want to check in with them, and everybody's going to be different. Some kids like to just, other kids need a little bit to kind of collect themselves and kind of process in their own mind what happened before they share. Other kids start to feel that shame or guilt, and so they don't want to talk about it because they feel like they disappointed you. So the stabilization phase is really where we want to support. We want to remind them that we care about them, that they are safe. And we don't necessarily need to get into the like, you broke the rules, you need to owe me recess right now. We want to really just focus on the relationship between you and the student and helping them feel more comfortable and again, regulating. I want you to just think about a time when you were stressed recently. And I want you to put yourself then, you're walking into, after that stressful thing happened, you're going into, right, a kid's birthday party and you have to be like super happy. Is it genuine, or do you put on kind of a mask, right? With time, that happiness starts to be genuine, but for the first few minutes, we're usually faking. Now, as adults, we have more skills and regulation tools to be able to do that. These kids don't have those tools yet. And so in that stabilization phase, we want to make sure that we're really respecting what's happening internally and give their body and brain time to kind of catch up with, again, reality. Then we have the post-crisis phase. If you've been a part of a big behavior, It's pretty typical for a student to afterwards say they're really tired, ask for food, take a nap, feel like they can't do much of anything, and they're usually pretty quiet for a little while because their body is draining all of those stress hormones, so they really are physiologically tired. Their mind is processing what happened, their body is draining, so they might need some extra snacks, they might need a rest and sleep. And I think sometimes we feel like we have to talk it out so much, but giving them time really helps the brain and the body naturally de-escalate. And so then your conversation can be more effective and more powerful. So I don't want you to feel like you're ignoring the situation or the behavior, because we will come back and address it, but giving yourself and the student time helps the relationship, and it also helps your communication be most effective. The other thing to kind of think about is that not everybody goes through the entire crisis cycle every time. So you might have a kid who triggers, heads to crisis, and then like as soon as they're done, like they're like, I'm good, I'm gonna go back to class. But the next day or a couple hours later, they might kind of go back up. Sometimes if we don't give kids enough time to come down, we see them re-escalate. So you think the kid's calming down, and then, right, Mr. Johnny walks in the room and the kid's back up into crisis, and you're like, whoa, what just happened? So they haven't really worked through it. And so we really need to start paying attention to the surroundings and their body to give us clues. If that kind of hopefully is a brief overview. We're going to go on to some brain work now to kind of help. So let's do next slide. Okay, so this is kind of a super basic picture of the brain and three main states that we'll kind of talk about today. Have you guys ever heard of the hand model of the brain? And just kind of nod or raise your hand if you have, by Dr. Dan Siegel. Maybe not. Okay. So if you get a minute, I think the video is 2 minutes long. You can Google it, Dan Siegel, and he does a hand model of the brain, which he explains. And you can do this with kids too. It's a great resource. But he breaks the brain down into these three parts. So our wrist is our brain stem, the survival part. Your thumb is kind of the limbic system, so your hippocampus, amygdala, the things responsible for your emotions and hormone release. And then our fingers cover that, and that's our prefrontal cortex, or the executive state. So what's happening in that crisis cycle is our lid is being flipped. Our ability to think kind of goes offline. We call it flipping your lid. And then your emotion center of the brain is totally exposed. That takes over, and that's why those behaviors get so big. Or you're like, why can't this kid just calm down? They can't, because their emotion center is completely exposed. There's nothing kind of like connecting it to our thoughts or words. And then our survival, so our brain's primary function, if we think back evolutionary wise, right, is to keep us alive, is to keep us safe. How do we survive? And that's shifted over time, but all of our brains, our job is to keep us safe and survive. So these kids, even though they're sitting in class and you're teaching them math, you're not really threatening their survival, but their brain feels threatened. And this is that part where we can't judge the other person's experience. We can't judge this kid's experience, because the brain processes information in what we call close enough. So at night when we sleep, our brain processes information and sorts it into these little categories. And it goes like, right, this is all like the stuff of red. Oh, he's a big scary guy. That matches what happened to me when I was 3. This is this. This is that smell. I don't like that cinnamon smell. The candle's going, right? Goes over here. And our brain doesn't use logic. It just goes with close enough. So when we're like in therapy, when I'm reprocessing trauma with people, it's kind of interesting because things don't always logically connect, But if we go down to it, it's because of the emotions or feelings that come up within the body that the brain has connected. So the kid can't tell you, but once we kind of get into that work, so it's kind of interesting. But the message I want you guys to remember is the brain is focused on survival, and it's their perspective of what is happening, not yours. Okay. So these 3 states, and I broke it down into then questions to help us kind of focus, because I always think if we can use questions and that lens of curiosity, it helps us remove judgment. If I'm curious about what's going on with this kid or my colleague or my spouse, we're not judging, and we're not like, well, you're wrong, or that's silly, right? Or I would never do that. We're asking questions, we're gaining more information. It helps us, right, come from a place of compassion and empathy rather than judgment. It also helps us gather information so we can then better serve these students in the future. So am I safe? Am I loved? And what can I learn from this are kind of going to be our guiding questions. So in the next slide, I have it just kind of broken down for you of things that you might see. So in that brain stem, if they're focused on their safety, those are your kids that are fighting, they're completely given up. The goal is to make them feel safe. How do you do that? Give them space, right? Remind them that you are there so they're not alone. Am I loved, right? Those are the kids giving you attitude, talking back, telling you, calling you names or blaming you that they didn't get their homework done. Those are all ways that they're asking for connection. That next one is, what can I learn? Those are your kids ready to, like, they came to school, they had breakfast, they're ready to go. Or your kids that are like, how do I get better at this? They're asking questions and they're calm. In the next slide, what I did is I put those 3 questions in the crisis cycle. So when they're in baseline and kind of post-crisis, they're in that state of, what can I learn? Have those conversations. If they're triggered or we're stabilizing, we want to focus on that love. Let them know that you care, right? Let them know that they are connected to you, to the school, to this place, that they matter. And then in that crisis phase, am I safe? That is paramount to everything else. The brain can't do anything else in that crisis moment. So hopefully those 3 questions just kind of help guide you to responding in a positive way. Kind of moving through that, talking a little bit about the power of calm. Even if you don't feel calm internally, acting calm is really important. They're watching you, even if they don't look like they are. They're watching you and how you respond to them, to their behavior. And in these moments, you are providing that sense of safety and security for them. So just kind of remember that your calm will help ground them. It'll help that crisis cycle move through faster. And now I have a little video on body language to just kind of help us understand that. Maybe.
I have to stop sharing for 1 sec.
Okay.
Now I'm back.
Alice works at a local department store. She spends most of her day interacting with customers and coworkers. There's a lot of talking involved, but there's also another form of nonverbal communication that's being used just as often. Body language. Body language is the process of communicating through nonverbal signals. It includes things like our posture, facial expressions, gestures, and more. The meanings of these all vary from culture to culture, but we instinctively read body language and interpret it as some expression of moods, feelings, or intentions. So, in Alice's case, even before she speaks, she may be communicating all kinds of things to customers. For example, if her arms are crossed and she's avoiding eye contact, customers may not find her to be very approachable. However, Alice could be in a friendly mood, even though her body language suggests otherwise. And this isn't necessarily a conscious choice that she's made. This could just be how she habitually presents herself. But if Alice is aware of these habits, she can work on improving her body language. Changing your habits can be difficult, but if you take time to pause and check in with yourself, you can start to notice them and adjust things to become a better nonverbal communicator. This awareness can also be applied to reading others' body language. Let's say Alice notices that her coworker is unusually quiet, has his body turned away from her, and is slouched over. She may pick up that he's upset, or that there's an unspoken issue at hand. Depending on Alice's relationship with him, she may want to give him some space, or ask if anything's wrong. Being aware of the various aspects of body language can make all the difference in how people perceive you and how you perceive them. Be aware of how you...
Okay. So that's just a short kind of video on body language, and just like the video said, being aware of your own natural state. Somebody in the chat just said, "Oh, I'm aware of like crossing my arms." Right? My natural comfort position is legs crossed, arms crossed, and I kind of like slouch, right? But that looks really closed off. It looks kind of angry. It looks like I don't really want to hang out with people. So it works really well for me when I'm in like my antisocial mood out in public, but it does not help when like I genuinely want to make a connection or I'm with kids. So it's something to really check in with yourself, ask your spouse or a friend to just kind of like observe you and be like, hey, what's like my natural state, just to bring your own awareness to it, and really think about opening up your body. What that does is it reduces the threat to our kids, to your students. And I know you're not like walking around like, I'm gonna get you, but if you are looking angry or you're turned off because you're avoiding eye contact or your body language looks closed, kids are not going to feel like you're open to talking with them or sharing. The other thing is, during those crisis moments, during those big escalations, really keeping our body smaller. One of the things that I was like trained on is like, if you can, sit on the floor. Always keep your hands like open, so like you're not surprising the kids, because you don't know what is reminding them of this moment. So making yourself smaller and calmer and as open as possible. Some communication tips to just kind of help with kids, not when they're escalated, but in that like post-crisis phase, stabilization or baseline, you're just getting to know them. Speaking calmly and privately. We don't ever want to call those kids out in class and be like, hey, let's talk about what happened last Tuesday, right, in front of everybody. So pull them aside, speak respectfully. Using their name goes a long way. Simple language. If we're talking about an emotional time, we want to help their brain feel safe. So simple language to just kind of like, tell me what was going on. Don't use big words. Don't talk about like consequences. You're just kind of trying to get information. Reflective listening. That's when you share what you hear back to them. Now, kids usually have their own language, right? There's like all the slang now that I don't know, but they also use different words, right? Like I've had kids tell me like, it feels like my tummy hurts or my tummy's upset, because they don't know what it means to feel sad, right? Or they don't know what mad feels like because they haven't been taught that. So, okay, tell me about what else happens when your tummy feels like that, is how we would use that reflective listening. Help them find language. You don't look happy. Are you maybe feeling sad or angry, right? You don't look like you want to play right now. Would you like a different activity? But kind of help give them words that they might not have at this age. And then provide positive feedback, acknowledge their strengths. You're doing a really good job at this puzzle, or you're doing a really good job showing me on the poster how you feel. So just some kind of things to think about there. Environment tips. Most of these I did share on the handout. Setting up your expectations for your room ahead of time, creating a structured schedule, having a safe place, moving slowly. You don't want to surprise anybody. If you're dealing with a student who's emotional escalated, giving them space, helping to regulate. If you notice the kids escalating, remove your own self and your ego. It's not about you in this moment. It is about regulating the kid. And so, like, if you're noticing things getting worse, just step out, call your teaching partner, call help, because I promise that will help kind of lower that better. The environment is usually something that we can control pretty well, because we can't control what's going on internally, but we can help what's going around the kid to a point. And then encourage cooperation, not control. I know, like, that control and compliance piece gets really nice, and it makes your life really easy, but we want to focus on that genuine connection with our students and getting them engaged in a way that feels authentic to them. So that might be just Johnny sitting in the back of the classroom and, like, not playing blocks, but he's listening to what's going on. That might be cooperating for him. So just kind of thinking about some things like that to just kind of help you if you're dealing with some of these more challenging kiddos. A poem we can take a minute to just kind of read. So in the chat, if you don't mind, I'd like to just kind of hear how this poem maybe changes the way you see, like, a student or a behavior when you don't have all the information. One of the things that I hope it does is just that understanding the behavior, understanding what's going on outside of your classroom, in their home, in their community, might give you great perspective on how they are walking into your room. So a couple people, right, saying that they're carrying heavy loads. It's the norm in our community. So just being aware of that as the teacher, right? If a kid shows up late and we maybe don't know all the details, but we know they have a heavy load to carry, do we want to, like, be like, where's your pencil? You forgot your paper right away? Or is it, I'm so glad you made it today, even if they're 2 hours late, because I don't know what they did in that 2 hours that they weren't there with me. So again, it's not to excuse behaviors, but it's to help understand, because when we understand what's going on, we can provide really effective support. Because we don't want to, right, like the last person's comment, we don't want to penalize the kids for parents. But if we don't know what's going on with the parents, the kids often get punished, right? We get marked tardy, they get an absence letter, they have to go before the school board, whatever those policies and procedures are. But the more aware we are of what's going on, we can help and not penalize the kids and make school a more enjoyable experience for them. So that's my kind of hope with sharing that, is just that understanding is not excusing, but it helps, again, allow us to see the picture with more curiosity of what's going on. And then I have a little cheat sheet for you. I won't charge you like $150 an hour to break these down, so you get this for free. But this is just kind of my own take on what I've noticed most of the time, not everybody, but these emotions kind of can tell you in younger kids. So if somebody's saying they're mad or showing mad, something did not go as planned. They had an idea of what was going to happen and it did not go that way. Sad, there's a loss of some kind. Now this could be really simple. There's a loss of Johnny said he didn't want to be my friend, or it could be deeper. Anger and mad are different. So I did put those two things there. Usually little kids will say, I'm mad. If they can't express it, but they're turning red, they have fists, they're shaking, that's anger. And little kids can't articulate that, but you see it in them. I want to control something. Scared, there's something going on I don't understand. Lying, I can't tell you the truth because it's not safe. And then if they're defiant to you, it's that they can't trust you because they have to be in charge. Again, these things don't have to make sense to you and in that moment, but it's how their brain is processing this information and sorting it in those kind of close enough bins. And the brain's job is, again, help them survive, to keep them safe. So if they can't trust you, or they've been taught it's not safe to tell you the truth, or in past experiences when they've talked, it hasn't been safe. We have to change all of that and teach the brain different ways. So just a little thing, keep in your back pocket. I think I did put that in the handout for you as well. And so kind of now that we've looked a little bit at like the brain and trauma, I just want to touch on that social emotional learning. So I know it's like the buzzword and everybody talks about it, but it's a huge umbrella and not a lot of people talk about really like what it is. So CASEL is the leading resource on social emotional learning. And it describes the process as basically helping to develop identities, manage emotions, achieve personal goals, show empathy for others, and maintain relationships and make good decisions, right? Which is like, awesome. We want that for every human. And that's really what that like the buzzword social emotional learning is like broken down into. The next slide has a graphic for you guys of the different categories to kind of teach those things. If you've seen this before, great. If not, feel free to kind of dig into it a little bit more. But if you're feeling confused on like, how do I do this? Like, I don't even know where to start, or like, how do I start using SEL in my classroom? These domains might be helpful of teaching some self-awareness or decision-making or relationship skills. And then the blue circles kind of help you view it as kind of the different systems that might be involved. So your classroom, your school has different policies, the families, and then the outer community. And we want all of those things taught in all those different systems. So kind of thinking about how that might happen, but that might help, again, just give you an idea of how to incorporate this more into your classroom or into your school setting. Some questions to just kind of think about. Is there a domain that you notice your students needing more support in? Are you noticing a kid struggling with a certain domain more than others? That might be an area to focus on. Or are there systems in place in your school that you feel are hindering kind of that emotional safety and kind of teaching process? Like one of the things that I really fought against in some of my schools was the tardy and attendance, because a lot of kids that can get them into trouble, and there's a lot of things going on that are outside of their control. So that was kind of a policy and system that was bigger than just me, that I had to really kind of work through with certain schools that I was involved with. So just some things to think about. Okay. So we've kind of come this far on how we can look at this systemically. But you've got these little people in your rooms. How do you build or rebuild a healthy relationship with a student? So usually teachers are gifted at building the relationship. It's something that's inherent to you guys. Gotcha. But rebuilding after a behavior, after something happens, I have a lot of teachers that come to me and are like, well, how do I make it better? Because now the kid doesn't like me anymore, right? So just go back to the basics. It's kind of just a list of the things, right? Being genuine, owning your feelings, modeling healthy things, having honest conversations with them. Age appropriate, but honest is okay. And those little things go a long way. Next, I have, I think, a chart. Okay, so these behaviors I put together. Like I said, I did little kids just because that was kind of the age group that Jackie felt like we would have the most of. These are the behaviors that I see often kind of misunderstood or viewed as problematic when they're actually developmentally appropriate. Now, can they be a pain in the butt in the classroom? Absolutely. But it's okay if we see these things, and it's actually a signal to us of what we can help teach, kind of like the healthier way to respond or work through. But these are behaviors that you probably will see. We want you to see. They're not a sign of like a more serious mental health issue going on or things like that. So I think this is a really good reference. Again, they can definitely be a pain in the butt in the classroom, and I get that. But just know they're developmentally appropriate, and we want the kids to work through it. There are also things that we want to teach, right? So just kind of remembering that. I do have some warning signs of some things that I would consider more serious if you're seeing, I think on the next slide. Yeah, so again, those absences or late arrivals, disorganization, kind of out of nowhere, right? Like I'm sure you've all seen the kid that struggles with kind of attention or hyperactivity, but you know that from day one. They're pretty obvious. But this would be a kid that like kind of out of the blue, they're starting to struggle. They're really disorganized. Lack of cooperation or inability to communicate with other people. An increase in accidents. If you're dealing with little kids, right, they might not be fully potty trained yet. They're going to have accidents. But if that's normal for them, okay. But if those increase, or you have a kid that hasn't had an accident before and you're noticing a couple in a row, we want to look into that. Complaints of fatigue or unexpected pains. A lot of little kids get headaches and tummy aches a lot. But that's a sign of some other things going on. Difficulty concentrating or remembering things. That's again, knowing those kids and their body language. Oh, I forgot. If they're saying that, but they really look like they forgot, it's maybe an indication there's something else going on because they're not absorbing that information. So just some things to kind of watch for. Again, we all have bad days. But if this is like a pattern, for little kids, I would say, a week to 2 weeks. If you're noticing some of these things, maybe reach out, right? See what's going on, have more of those conversations. And again, keep in mind like ages and stages of where they are. If there's some other learning disabilities or physical disabilities, that might impact some of these as well. Okay, so kind of the nuts and bolts here, wrapping up. But what does connection mean? Connection is ultimately the feeling of safety and learning. So if I make somebody feel safe and comfortable, and I can calm their body and their nervous system, I allow them the ability to learn, and therefore we form a connection. So it's kind of how I want you to kind of break that down. One of the phrases I often hear is, oh, the kid's looking for attention. They just want my attention. And I'm sure you've heard it because it was really popular for a while, changing attention to connection. But yes, they want attention because they want your connection. They want to connect with you. We are social beings, and we have a need to connect with other people. As teachers, you are that person that those kids want to connect with. And so making sure that you are honoring that. If you've heard of Dr. Gottman, he's a psychologist who studies relationships. And one of his most profound kind of studies was on interactions of positive relationships. And he has a 5-to-1 ratio. There should be 5 positive interactions to every 1 negative. And it seems like a lot, but I want you to just kind of think for a second, how many times a day are you positively interacting with kids versus negatively interacting with kids? How much are we putting into like that bank account before we have to withdraw with that negative? It's important because it helps that level of safety. It also helps those students build resilience. The more positive they have and feel and safer they feel with you, the stronger the connection, the more they can bounce back from the negative experience. So just kind of thinking about that. The next slide, I think, is language. Language is one of the easiest ways we have to add the positives. So really watching your language. I know schools have, kind of video rules and things like that, but just a strategy, if you have like a teaching partner or a para or somebody in your room, ask them to just like make a tally for even just like 20 minutes one day of your positive language that you use when you're teaching. No running, change it to walk, please. Don't touch, no hitting, right? Gentle touch, quiet voices, please. Just shifting that language. Not a huge difference. You're still addressing the situation and what you need addressed, but the brain hears that different than if you say don't or no or stop. Kids are taught, right? My daughter's 1.5, and I mean, like, no, don't, stop, big words, right? We yell them, we want that attention because at her age, right, it's dangerous. Like, she's standing on the couch, she fell off the other day, bumped her head, like, not good, right? So they're programmed really early to recognize those words, but then we stop listening to the rest, and it just means I messed up, I'm bad. By the time the kid's 6, that just means I'm doing something bad, right? So if we take those words away, the brain's more likely to actually hear what we're saying, and they're more likely to view it as like a positive. Oh, she just wants me to walk in the hall, okay, rather than I got yelled at. So it just helps that ratio there. Then I just have some support ideas for you guys, some interventions. I'm not going to talk about all of them, but I do want to talk just about 2 of them. My favorite is the top one, 10x2. It's a strategy where you take 2 weeks and 1 kid, or 10 days, I guess. So almost 2 weeks, depending on if you're a 4-day school week or not. But 2 minutes a day, any time of day that works for you, but you're giving your student 2 minutes of unstructured time with you to just talk about whatever they want. It seems silly, it seems minor, but after that 10 days, they feel comfortable sharing their Minecraft character with you or telling you what they had for dinner the night before. Whatever. You might be completely bored, you might learn something, but it helps them feel like you are paying attention to them because you're not trying to grade, you're not on your cell phone, you're not at recess duty. You are giving them 2 minutes of time, which is huge in that developmental lens. My other one is Name It to Tame It. If you've heard of that Dr. Dan Siegel that I mentioned earlier, it's naming the emotion. Even if the kid can't do it, right? It's you naming it. You look frustrated to me. You look happy right now. But helping them understand what they're showing you on their face, what their body is doing, so they learn and make those connections with that regulation. If you have questions about any of these other ones, feel free to message me and let me know, and I'd be happy to visit with you. But those are kind of my two favorite for you. And then next, I just have another resource if you are kind of working with kids who have experienced more trauma, or you're interested in learning more yourself. This is a really great just kind of breakdown of the bigger picture of what we're doing when we say we want to create trauma-informed care, and the steps to take to do that. So number one, safety, which we've talked a lot about, and regulating the nervous system. If we can keep kids safe and feel safe and help them regulate, we've done a huge service. Then building those connected relationships, creating that coherent narrative, empower with strategies. These are things that schools have tremendous impact to do if we take the time to kind of utilize them. But involving the kids, that power with, rather than telling them what to do, or, you know, deciding for them. And then those social emotional resiliency skills. If you do steps 1 through 6, 7 happens. And so you don't really have to do much for step 7 if we've provided kind of that framework. Again, this is the bigger picture of kind of that trauma-informed care, but if you're interested in that, this is a really great just kind of resource. Or if you're feeling lost, like, I don't know what to do. Am I doing step 1? Am I doing step 2? I need to work on step 3. But it can just be a nice guide for you. I'm kind of closing out today. I have my favorite kid president. I'm a big kid president fan. But how do we change the world? And so he is going to tell us that, and that is where we will end tonight. But thank you guys so much for joining us and for your time.
Don't get off. When the video's over, I'll give your feedback form.
There are lots of ideas how you can change the world. Some people think you should just complain about it. That won't change the world, it'll just make it mad. Some people think you have lots of money, making it rain everywhere you go. Holla for a dollar. Some people think you have to be really loud and yell a lot. It's like with a bullhorn shouting, "Hey you, yeah you, do it my way right now, you heard?" Other people choose to just make fun of everything. That's dumb, everyone's dumb. It's easier to make fun of stuff, but it's cooler to make stuff. Some people think changing the world can only be done by the smartest person in the world. Just put them in a room, let them figure it out. The solution of world hunger? Food. Wow, that was like so amazing. Some people see the bad in the world and they just decide to ignore it, but that won't help anything. Some people think you have to be really famous and super cool. In fact, lots of people think you have to be really powerful to make a difference, like being mayor or senator or president. But the truth is, a title doesn't make you more important. The world is changed by you. It's one person filled with love, and they just have to live it out, so they do something awesome. Then that person is filled with love, and they do something awesome. It just goes on and on and on and on. And the next thing you know, everything's awesome. Some people think it's impossible to change the world.
It's impossible to change the world.
Well, you can see why they could think that. Living in the world with kids who are hungry, people who are homeless, families who aren't happy. I'm just trying to figure it out like everybody else, man. I do know this, though. Next time you feel overwhelmed or totally alone, remember this. Things don't have to be the way they are. The world is changed by ordinary people. Little people living out big love. And that's what gives the world a reason to dance.